And again, what confidence Vince and the WWF had in Goldust. I
Yeah.
mean, again, to recap, we go Roddy Piper, Ultimate Warrior, Undertaker, and now Ahmed Johnson. And most people felt Ahmed Johnson was in line to be the next big babyface, arguably the number 2 or number 3 babyface maybe at the time behind Shawn and perhaps the Undertaker. So they're in a collision course now. It's going to be Ahmed Johnson and Goldust for the Intercontinental title at King of the Ring 1996. We did a full episode on this in the archives that you should check out if you want to hear more about King of the Ring 96. What an important show that was. It's the show where Austin 316 was born, but it's also the show where Ahmed Johnson beat Goldust to win the Intercontinental Championship. Believe it or not, they went like 15 minutes, even with Dustin working hurt. After a sleeper, Goldust is going to kiss Ahmed, which seems to give him superpowers. He wakes up, he hits Goldust with the Pearl River plunge, and he wins the Intercontinental title. I guess it makes sense if we're trying to protect Goldust and give him a chance to heal up. We needed him to drop the belt to somebody.
Right.
Ahmed Johnson is seemingly moving up on that babyface side of the aisle. What did you think of the decision to take the belt off of Goldust and put it on Ahmed Johnson?
Well, we kind of had to take it off Goldust. Whether we should have put it on Ahmed Johnson or not is arguable, debatable. That didn't work out long term, so apparently it wasn't a great idea. And Ahmed was just very green. He had $1 million body, and he had a look that you couldn't replicate by taking some guy out of the gym or off the street. He was very unique in that regard, but he had some issues. He had very little self confidence. He was always he was very untrusting. So, and that's because the boys in the locker room worked him. He was manipulated, and he thought guys were trying to help him, and they weren't. They were trying to screw him around.
Let's talk a little bit about the way Dustin felt after he lost to Ahmed Johnson. He wrote that things were changing. I could feel it. Vince was getting a lot of criticism from different groups. Parents were calling headquarters and complaining about Goldust. Some of them didn't want their kids watching if Goldust was performing. An article in the New York Times came out saying gay rights activists were upset over the character. The ratings were good, and as far as I was concerned, it wasn't my problem. I was having fun doing my job. I couldn't see the larger picture, and I'm not even sure how much I cared to see it. Needless to say, my insecurities started to rise towards the surface.
Right.
There were a couple of times when Vince told me not to do something, and I did it anyway. Don't rub up on anyone in the ring tonight, he said before one match. I did
I
it anyway.
remember that. I remember that. I rember that, Conrad.
Tell us
That
about
was
it.
that was a specific mandate from the head honcho. You know, there are just things that we did that were not received at all very well, not received at all in a very positive way. Not entertaining, not funny, just jaw dropping a controversy. So, but we had to start taking things away from Goldust uh, that would apply to his presentation, and that included rubbing against somebody, as you described, and that's what it was. And so it was. It would see something and say, "Oh, we can't do that again." Then we'd change it, and so because the character itself was controversial enough without adding extra. It's just going to be that way. I mean, he was what he was. He was open for suggestion, open for conversation, and so it was just a interesting time. And like I said, every night something would come out of the menu, something would be eliminated. Illustration being the rubbing against people scenario.
We've we want to make sure that we quote Dustin here. When Vince told him don't rub anybody in the ring tonight, and he does it anyway, he says that Vince was furious. He told me he'd fire me right there on the spot if I ever did something like that again. I apologize, but I still slipped up a couple more times. In a way, I think I knew it was all coming to an end. The roller coaster was gathering speed on the way down, and I was having a hard time hanging on. Man, to read his words right there, Like from the outside looking in, it feels like, hey man, you're not losing any ground. You're hurt. They're taking the belt off of you to,
All right.
I mean, it's part of a story and to give you.
Paranoia, Conrad. All about the
Yes.
money. All
Yes.
about the money. He saw money that may not be there for an extended length of time. You got to remember that it is his payoff for WrestleMania with Piper was by far the biggest pay-per-view payoff that he ever got, and maybe even to this day. He had that old wrestler. Well, this is going to end. I can't do anything about it. I'm stressing out. I'm insecure, and so here we are. His insecurity was going to be whether he was a Goldust or something else. That's just his nature. That was just his way of dealing with things, and a lot of it was contributed by the drug use. Paranoia runs deep. Deep in your heart, it will seep. Starts when you're always afraid. Come out of line, man, take you away, as some song would say, or something along those lines. Anyhow, it was that was just his nature. That was just his nature, raised in a wrestling family where you're always thinking about the worst case scenario. Not the glass there then would be half full or half empty as opposed to being half full.
Let's talk about what's next for Goldust. Unfortunately, the Village Voice, which is a big paper in the New York area, comes out on July 9th, and they're just ripping the WWF and Goldust, saying that this character has brought homophobia to new levels in the WWF. And that happens just a couple of weeks before In Your House #9, International Incident. It goes down July 21st in Vancouver. There's nearly 15,000 fans there. It's got to be the biggest ever for an In Your House event. And The Undertaker is working with Goldust. So once again, he's working with a tippy top guy. They're going to be stalling for about 3 minutes and 15 seconds. Then Undertaker's going to choke slam Goldust on the stairs and pick up the stairs, but Marlena's going to protect Goldust. So Undertaker drops the steps and dominates the next several minutes. Goldust eventually undoes the top turnbuckle padding, whips the Undertaker into the exposed metal on his back. Then he's going to drop the stairs on his back and go for a camel clutch. Taker makes a comeback, hits the tombstone, and as he's going for the pin, here comes Mankind from under the ring, who puts the mandible claw on the Undertaker. That gets the DQ. Hey, man, it's a big time pay-per-view. Anytime you're working with the Undertaker, but it does feel like now Goldust is kind of in the background, and we're transitioning into this Mankind Undertaker feud, which we know is great for Mankind, and we know they're going to do great stuff. But I can see how Dustin started to feel like, hey, I'm in the background now.
I'm getting passed over.
Yeah.
I'm losing my spot, as the great Arn Anderson once said. So, yeah, that's where that was. And again, when you're raised in a household of paranoia, shall we say, and a lot of old school wrestlers can understand this statement. You lose your spot, you think you're losing your spot. It's not a healthy environment. It's not a good mentally. And that's where Dustin was, smack dab in the middle of controversy and worried about his spot.